I want to talk about the issue of wives submitting to their husbands, husbands loving their wives sacrificially and leading them, and wives respecting their husbands. And I recognize that every marriage is different. Probably in some marriages this is harder, and other marriages less hard.
Sure.
But I'm wondering for the wife who wants to grow in this area of submitting, respecting, but who is struggling and maybe even feels devalued by the call to submit like that. What type of practical advice would you offer to someone who wants to grow in that area?
Yes. Well, like a lot of things, and we've already been discussing, there's the gospel hope is that we recognize our own fallenness, and we trust that God's way and God's path of growth and of maturity for us is a good one. And so, yes, even if you kind of get clear, and we tried on Sunday morning in the sermon of the surface objections that we might have to some of the things, or the cultural objections to what Ephesians 5 lays out, and we embrace a complementarian idea of marriage, trying to pursue that is really challenging. I just want to acknowledge that for both the husband to love his wife as Christ loved the church, and the wife to pursue that with her husband. It was interesting in our life group, and I mean we've got just, I think, reasonably well-adjusted people in our group that are there, married couples and singles, and we've got folks with kids, folks that don't have kids, and somewhat different experiences and backgrounds and so forth, all active in our faith now, and many of us having been walking in that for a while. But it was interesting, the discussion we had about our homes and where we came from in terms of our families, and that a number of us had some good and fairly healthy homes, but even those, if we went to church or whatever, it was either more a default to a traditional, something from tradition, like this is the way relationships are looked for a long time, or maybe a sort of intentional egalitarian approach to, okay, try to make everything 50-50, and some others in the group maybe had some genuinely challenging environments as a family. Point being, none of us felt, and this was 4 or 5 couples sitting around, 4 or 5 individuals sitting around, felt like we had a very good example that we had seen of this. So if that's true for our particular group, I imagine you extrapolate that. So all of us are operating from the deficit of, many of us had never seen that really played out, even if we came from a generally healthy home and upbringing. So I think we are working upstream on that. To your specific question about wives, certainly there are husbands who have genuinely lost the right to be respected. Not that can't be restored through reconciliation, and likewise, there are wives that could have damaged their relationship with the husband. But if we're talking about this issue, I tried to address it on Sunday too. Of course, when we talk about this practice of submission, we're never encouraging a wife to be in a situation where she would accept any abusive treatment,
Right.
physically, sexually, anything along those lines. In fact, we want to be a church where that doesn't happen, and we try to make sure women aren't in those relationships. So we're certainly not talking about that, but those are probably extremes. I'm sure what you're talking about is just the run-of-the-mill factor that, we're married for a while, we get to know each other, we know each other's warts and weaknesses, and it just becomes challenging for a husband to love his wife as he should, because sometimes love, ebbs and flows. Likewise, the desire to respect a husband and to follow his leadership. If he hasn't been leading in some areas well, it can be hard to keep pursuing that. It sounds probably like the simplest answer, but I think for both spouses, prayer is the pathway to see that, where we pray. A wife would hopefully be praying for her husband that he would pursue the things that he should be doing, even as, you know, all of us are supposed to remove the log from our own eye. So praying that she would do that in her posture, and hopefully a husband is doing the same thing. And in some ways, I think that's the best you can hope for, and that the Lord's then working in the midst of that and producing fruit in both of their lives. I don't, as I said on Sunday, I don't think it's a healthy posture for either husband or wife. I know it's not, to wait on the other person to get to some point or some posture that then they'll start doing their part of the equation. That's just going to create a standoff that doesn't lead to fruitfulness. So both have to kind of make a choice. And again, like Philippians says, consider the other person better than themselves, and maybe measuring too much that flaw in the other person, in this case the wife, and the husband hasn't led very well, doesn't seem worthy of respect in a few areas. Maybe try to take account of what are all the areas he is seeking to do that, and is worthy as he tries to follow
lean
the
into
Lord.
gratitude as much as you
try
can.
to do that, and see where your heart would go.
Yeah. I thought about too just the role of, like, looking at what the Bible says about my identity as a wife. If I'm feeling devalued by this, like, the gospel offers a lot of dignity to us as image bearers and children of God, especially, to be reminded of that God's not just saying, oh, you're lower than him or something.
Yes.
Just lean into that.